Arthur's grandfather had a diary. It contained a record of Lilliput, and there were rubies in it. They couldn't make their mortgage payments. Their home was about to be torn down. Arthur wanted to find the treasure. Arthur lit a candle and found a way to get into Lilliput. He snuck away his grandmother's key. He went upstairs and took Grandpa's telescope. Outside the door, he met Grandpa's friends. They set up a formation. They set up the telescope. Suddenly, a white light appeared. Arthur looked through the telescope and saw a little man. He was the Prince of Lilliput. The prince told the little mage to let Arthur in. Arthur magically grew smaller and smaller. Then he fell into the telescope. The prince drew a picture of a key. Arthur took out the key and opened the lock on the wall. Arthur passed through the lens and turned into a white-haired elf. The prince gave him a tour of the miniature world. Arthur met the king. He told the king what he wanted. The king said the ruby was in the tribe of the archdemon. That's where his grandfather disappeared. This is the princess of Lilliput. The princess needs to draw this sword in order to defeat the daemon from afar. But the princess couldn't pull out the sword. Then the devil's men came in. Arthur gets his ass kicked. The enemy is slowly approaching. Arthur struggled to pull out the sword behind him and struck forward. It turned out that the daemon's men had invaded the castle. The guards were trembling with fear, and the king fell down. The artillery is on its way. They took aim. They fired a cannonball, but it missed. Mr. Mouse came out. He used the machine to defeat the mosquitoes. The princess is surrounded by enemies. Arthur defeated them and saved the princess. He made the enemy kneel down and apologize to the princess. The king was shocked. Arthur captured the princess's heart. He became the hero of Lilliput, but they still had to defeat the archdemon. The chancellor asked Arthur to help him get his son back. So Arthur set out on a journey with the princess and the prince. The three little people were walking through the meadow. A centipede appeared in front of them. The princess chopped off the centipede's white hair. The centipede is about to attack. The three of them jumped into the grass beside them. They found a walnut and used the fountain to fly up to the sky, but hit a bee. They hit the ground, but they weren't hurt. Then an earthworm appeared. The princess drew her sword again and stabbed it. The earthworm was enraged. The earthworm sent the walnut flying. They fell off a cliff. The walnut fell in half. They floated down the river, but then there was a waterfall ahead. Arthur tore off the princess's clothes and tied it to his sword. He threw the sword with all his might. They made it out. They saw the enemy collecting straws. They climbed into the straws. They got into the horde of the archdemon. The princess suddenly pointed her sword at Arthur. She had to face the archdemon alone. Before leaving, she gave Arthur her first kiss. Then she entered the stone door. The princess faced the daemon alone. The daemon was not afraid. If the princess agreed to marry him, he would let the people of Lilliput go. But the princess wouldn't agree. He was so angry, he arrested her. Arthur and the prince were caught outside. Arthur met his missing grandfather here. Mole opened the trap. The light has been refracted many times. It shines on the throne of the daemon king. Just now, Arthur realized it was the ruby he was looking for. The devil threw them into the sewer. Then he opened the valve of the straw. The flood would soon be upon him. Arthur saw his little sports car, tighten the switch, and the car was off and running, and it went around the big bugs on the road. It was almost home, but by this time, the car had run out of power. They got out and ran. The flood was right behind them. They knocked on the door as hard as they could. The king heard the knocking. The flood was coming. They were terrified. Luckily, the king opened the gates in time and got them in. Arthur returned to the real world, and so did Grandpa. Mole opened the trap. The jewel shines a red light. Arthur threw a baseball at the daemon's base. The baseball destroyed daemon's base and blocked the drain. The place was instantly flooded with water. Diablo escaped on a mosquito. The floodwaters of Lilliput have receded. They're out of danger. The ruby slowly rose to the surface. Arthur gave the ruby to his grandfather, and they paid their debt. Arthur poked the land with a straw and sent the little mole back to Lilliput. Arthur was on the second floor looking out the window, and in the tree outside the window, the princess of Lilliput was looking at Arthur.